this on YouTube so we can have the video afterwards. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, and then I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, so we're gonna go over homework 4, just like some of the things that you're gonna use in homework 4. So we're gonna start with the math part. So again, this was already, we talked about this in the lecture, but just to iterate on that. So when we make a map, the data input can be GeoJSON or TopoJSON. So GeoJSON, we can directly use that for making map, but for TopoJSON, we need to put it into a transform it into a GeoJSON object. So that's why we do topo.json.features, and then we put your object and then the topology here. And then that will give you the GeoJSON object for you to get the map. And then another important thing is that we need a projection. So this is actually already provided for you in the homework. So you need the projection to get where your places will be on the map. So to get this, it's just that projection and D3, they have a bunch of different projections. And then put it together, we have the projection, but we also need to have a path generator. So this is why we do like D3 GeoPath. This will give you a path generator. And then finally, we just put the data in, like bind the data to the path, and then append path. And then the special part here is we do D, comma path. So you actually similar things in the last homework as well. And I got some questions in my office hour exactly how path work. So path is like, imagine you have a pen on a paper and you tell it how to move on that paper. So that's why the D elements, when you look at your console, it's quite complicated. That's because your pen is moving around the paper. So that's why it's quite complicated. It's telling it how to move. So I have an example here that goes through basically the entire part 1, but not actually the homework. Okay. So everyone can see my code pen here. I'll put this, publish this after the lab as well. So here we actually have the UFO sightings across USA. So we have a map here, and then the green dots here are the UFO sightings. So first we load in these data. The map is just telling how to draw the background, the USA map. So the UFO path is the UFO sighting data, so the green dots are here. I'll talk about this right after when we talk about, like, when we actually talk about that. So we just load in the data. We have this also in the homework as well. We're loading like data here. And then we also get the UFO data and only select the US country. The country is USA. So here we can actually look at how the data look like. If I scroll this all the way up. So this is the UFO data because I print out UFO here. So we can, okay, here. Oh, it skipped probably below here. I'll just refresh this. Okay, so now we should actually have the UFO data here. So here we can see like it will say the longitude, the latitude, and which state that is from. So this is actually quite important for what we're trying to do here because we have the state information. But then we notice that this is the abbreviation of the state. But then when we load in the data, it's actually the full name for the state. So here we need to map the abbreviation for the state into the feature. So here is what we do. We load in that state dictionary, which is something like this. So it has the full name and then the abbreviation here. So this is the dictionary, and then you can just look up this dictionary by a bracket here. So we load in the map data, and then dot features will give us the feature in there, which is this one. So dot features, and then for each one, you can see that it has the name, which is the full name. And so we need to get the abbreviation from the other dictionary. So that's what we do here. We said, what is the abbreviation? Which is it goes to state dictionary, and then do a bracket here, and then you put in your the name that you're looking for, and then you get out. So if you get something, so this question mark means you try to do this, and if you get something, this is the output. If that is false, which means that state is not in the dictionary, that will be null. So this is just how you write this. Like if you do a if else statement, it also works, but this is just a shorter way to write that. So we get the abbreviation, and then we go through the UFO data and find that state data. So now we can see how many UFO sightings is there for each state. So this is 0, and then we can go find something that is not 0. Let's see. So Minnesota has 2. It has 2 UFO data we've just put in there. So in the homework, we asked you to map the region information to the map data. So it's similarly, you have to do .map and then go through everything. And you probably want to do a dictionary for the region. So mapping the country information to the region information, and then you get the region from that dictionary. So this is the O1 operation, much faster. And then you just put that back in. So we actually have a class that gave you a region in there, so you're gonna fill in that. And then, so this is the data part. Do we have any question on that? Okay, I'll just
say that on the schedule website.
What?
Did you say that this tutorial thing is on the schedule website?
It's not. I will publish that after the lab if that's okay.
Sure. Will it be published on the schedule website?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I'll just publish it, and then if it's not on the schedule, I'll make an announcement of these tutorials.
Okay. Thanks.
No problem. So we're gonna keep going to actually draw the map. So I'm gonna just make this a little bit smaller. So we have that information. So similarly, we do a projection. This is different from the projection we provided you in the homework because we're only drawing the USA map. So we use a USA specific projection. So we tell it the projection here, we'll set it up. And then we have 2 functions here that takes in the SVG element, the projection, and the data, and then we'll draw the map and draw these markers. So for the map function here, I'm gonna talk about tooltip later. So first, of course, you append the G, and then you name it map layer. So this is pretty normal D3 stuff that you probably have worked with before. So here, you notice that we have different colors for these states. So this is based on how many UFO sightings there are in the state. For red states, there are 0 sightings. And then for like California or Texas, you see that there are many circles here. So these are darker colors. So we actually do a quantity scale. So this is another scale that you use in D3. And it is quantized scale. So you just do a D3 scale and then put the range. These are color input. So you have different colors that you want to use for this scale, for the range. And then we calculate the, this is basically the, let's see. So you calculate the scale for the mean and you get the mean and max, and then you get the scale. So now you have the domain for the color. So this should be all
Excuse me.
clear.
Can you just, I'm a little bit confused about when you call the map function on the from the map data object, what is that .map function doing exactly? I'm just a bit confused by it.
Yeah, so let me see. Let's just start a new thing so I can, let's just do it in here. So let's define, can everyone actually see my console? How do I make this bigger? Can you see my console here?
Yeah.
Let me hide this. Okay, so if we let A equals 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is A's array. So for JavaScript, there is a .map function for the array implementation. So you can call that .map. So .map, this takes in a anonymous function. So you can do a variable here. So we normally use D for when we do anonymous function in D3. So we can do D here, and then we're gonna say D plus 1. And then we assign that to B. So now it just went through everything in A, add 1 to that. So .map is a way that you loop through this array, and then you do something with each element, and then it can return something out so that you construct a new array. So this is a way to write this much faster when you only have one line, but you can actually write the whole thing out. So let's define C, a.map. So now we're gonna do a whole function here. So remember when you do function, you wanna return something. So we're gonna do, let's see, what are we gonna do? We are gonna make a object of something. Okay, so we're gonna let obj equals the element is called. I'm not sure if this will work, but let's see. It's the input for each one, and then we're gonna return obj. Let's see if this works. So we just created C, and for C, we have one element in there. It's an object, and each one has something called element, and it's actually the value from A. So does that make sense? What you have to do? So
yes, it's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so it basically takes the anonymous function, and this one has a D, which is the first variable is always the data, which is the elements in there. And then if you do a D comma I or D comma index or whatever, the second one is the index. So if you want to use the index, you can also use that. But if it's a one variable, it will expect just to be the elements. If it's two variable, it's the element and the index.
And you said this this map function is in like constant time. It will go through these elements in constant time. Is that what you said? I thought you said O1 or something real briefly earlier. I might have misheard you.
Oh, when I said O1 was that when you look up in the dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have an element object, let's say this obj equals, let's see, A is 1, B is 2, C is 3. So to look up this object, if you do 1, this is I messed up.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're like accessing.
When you look up, it's a O1 operation. But
gotcha.
map is a ON operation because you go through each element.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna keep going here. This is stuck. I'm gonna refresh this. Okay. Okay, where was I? Draw map. Okay. So we have the color scale here, and then so this is basically do the path generator that I have in my slide. So we get the path generator and then put in the projection. So this actually we haven't input the data yet. So this is just a path generator. And then here we bind the data and create these map based on the data. So we select the map layer and select all paths, and then we bind the data. Here we use drawing. This is so using drawing is much easier than enter and exit, and I'll talk about that later, specifically for enter and exit. And then here, so like I talked in the slides, we have a D, and then this we input the path generator because this will just input the map data in there. And then we fill in these states based on the UFO sighting and use the color scale that we have, which is called color. So we define it here. It's a scale quantity. So we have that. So now we finish the fill, and then you notice that when you mouse over this, you can get what is the state. So to do that, we have a mouse over function. So this is the D3 event saying like I'll mouse over, do something, something. So tooltip is actually, we defined it here. So tooltip is a layer that we have here. So it's a div. And then we select that layer. So we add a transition. This is just basic transition to make it not opaque. So right now this is opaque, and then you can make it not opaque. So opacity is 1. And then I actually just read a question in homework question saying how do we make the tooltip right at where we're hovering? So this is how. So we get the D3 event. So this is when you do something like this is a D3 event. Like if you click on something, that's a D3 event. And with the D3 event, you can actually get the location of that event. And then you can style that div based on that location. So we can actually do a console log here and see just what D3 event looks like. So here, if I hover this, you can see that this is a mouse event. And then in here, you can actually get a lot of information. So you can just style that, style your tooltip based on that information. So I hope that answered the question there. And then you can do on mouse leave. On mouse leave, you make the tooltip transparent. So actually tooltip is always there, but if we just make it opaque, opacity equals to 0, you can't see it anymore. So here is the event we have for this. And then we are gonna draw these lines.
Question about the tooltip real quick.
Yes.
I don't understand, why is it like a div with the ID tooltip and there's nothing inside that div? What exactly is that doing?
So you notice that we have a tooltip.html because tooltip is not part of the SVG element, it's a div. So for div to input the information, we do .html, and then that generates whatever the stuff is in there. So this is a function that is actually defined in here. So the state tooltip ranger. And so it inputs the data, which is when you do the mouse hover, the anonymous function has the input that's the data, and then you generate this text that you want to have. So it has a H2. So all of these are not regular SVG, right? So you have this text, and then you can just return this text. So this is the whole thing that will generate the tooltip. And then if we do the .html, it will just assign that inside the div. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, I guess I just don't see anywhere.
If you have something, let's see, if we just start from 1, 2, 3, I'm not sure if that's gonna work. Okay, you see that there was a 1, 2, 3 appeared, and then it probably disappeared because we set that to opaque, not opacity 0. So it disappeared. But then it's not 1, 2, 3 anymore because the .html override the input into whatever that was generated based on the function below. So all of these goes inside the div.
So if I understand correctly, it's basically saying that like whatever you want to pop up, have this thing pop up, is going to be displayed inside that div once you mouse over. And once you stop mousing over, then it's going to disappear. Okay.
Yes, because the opacity is set to 0 when you mouse leave, and then that's disappearing.
It's almost like the ID tooltip is like whatever that box is. Like that's just what it's drawing.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So when that happens, is the div essentially being populated with whatever you're hovering over, and then it goes opaque? And then if you hover over a different state, does it just update the div?
It
or
does.
Or are there 50?
So,
Okay.
it's not, you're not creating one div for each country. You're only using a single div that is called tooltip. So that's why we actually, so for each of these functions, so we were talking about just drawing the map. So the tooltip is just selecting the hashtag, the ID tooltip. So you only have one tooltip. You only use that single one that will appear and disappear. And then when it appear, which is a mouse over event, you make that tooltip opacity equals to 1. That's how to make it appear. And then .html is to put all the text information you want in there. Yeah. And then style is how I described to make it like, you see that it moves around when I change the state. So this is still the same div. I'm just making it different places. So that's how you make it using this style. Because it's not an SVG element, you can't do .attribute. So you have to use different things here.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so I was talking about the graphical here. So D3 has this function called geographical that will generate these lines. And then because we only have USA here, so I put an extended step so that we're only displaying this much, not the entire world. So this is also similar to how we get the GeoJSON information. So it's just a data that we're going to input here. So we are going to do select the graph layer. So we have a layer that just for this. So append another G that's a layer. Select all path in this layer, and then we do a binding the data. So the data to get this is graphical, which is this dot lines. So dot lines will give you all the GeoJSON, like the GeoJSON features. So this is how you get that. And then we do enter append. So like this is like pretty regular things. So we put that into a class. And then, so similarly, we are also going to use this path generator. So it's the same one that we used for the entire, the USA states. So this path generator really, it doesn't take in data. So whatever your data here is going to input in here, and it will generate the path for this. So that's why we're using the same one. Also because we're just so that we have the same projection. Otherwise it will look very weird.
I have a question.
Yes.
So like, say we're using like the world, do we have to call extent? Will it still just draw everything, or do you have to specify extent?
I don't think you need to specify extent for that.
Okay.
I'm only using that because we're drawing the USA.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can play with that and see like how it looks. And then I'm gonna skip some of this for the draw markers because we actually don't ask you to draw circle on the map, but this is pretty similar. We just have another layer and then have a scale for the circle. That's for the size of the circle. Let's say like the circle range is 2 to 7. And then we bind the data, have the circle, drawing the circle, And then for each circle, you have to have the CX, CY, and R for it to appear. So here, the reason that we are using projection here is because we need to project the longitude and latitude in the projection we're using for the state. Otherwise, it will just appear at random location. So the projection will take in this this box, like the array that the first one is longitude, the second is latitude, and then we only want the longitude output. So that's why we have a 0 here. And then for CY, similarly, we have 1 because that's the second element of the output. So we have latitude here. And then we have the circle scale. So based on the duration, we're going to adjust the circle size. So this is all the same from the previous one. Okay, any question on this demo? Okay, then I'm gonna move on. Okay, so we're gonna talk about some parts in the scatter plot. So one thing that we ask you to do is to create axes and using class. So why do we want to use class for the axes? Okay, so I have a very simple example here. So this is just setting things up. So imagine because in the homework you have different data sets. So here, let's just say we have data 1, data 2, data 3. And then in the draw plot, we set up this axis. So here this is just having a SVG appended to the canvas. And then for this SVG, we append one G element, and that's X axis. And then we're gonna append another text. So this is draw plot. It's similar to your homework. And then your homework asks you to have an update plot that will take in like data and whatever the X indicator, Y indicator, and circle indicator, I think. So the reason that we want to do class is so that you don't do something like, where is here? So I grade this out because if I do this, every time you update the plot, you will append another G. So this applies to all of the operations you want to do in update plot, that you don't want to just append another G, because that way you're going to keep appending layers onto layers onto layers. So instead of append another G, we have selection on the X-axis. So we already created that layer and we select this based on the class. And then we call the D3 X bottom. So we take in the X scale, and then this X bottom will draw these X axes for us. Axes, yes. And then so you can see that if I change this, it will just change into data 2. This state 2 data has different range. So you're still using the same layer, but you can update the axes based on that. So any question about drawing axes for the scatter plot?
So when you first draw the axis, you're just setting the domain and range up to be like the width of the SVG, and then you later update the domain and range so that they're like dynamic to the data. Is that correct?
So the range should never change because that's always your canvas size, right? So if you're setting your SVG, if you want it to be whole width, that should never change for the range. So domain is actually what changes. It's based on the data. So max here gets the D3.max will give you the max value. So from the input data. So this actually changes. But you should not change range if you don't want this, so this width to change.
So,
so if you
on our assignment, under draw plot is when it tells us to construct the axes, but we haven't so is it in our constructor that we should build the array of the plot data objects so that like when we in draw plot when it asks us to make our axes, what should we be using to scale those axes?
So you're actually not directly drawing the axis. You can just do append the G and do the axis,
okay.
but you actually want to call the D3 axis bottom in the update plot, because if you do that in your draw plot, you don't actually know the data, right?
Yeah. Okay. So just to reconfirm what we just said, in draw
so
plot,
I don't think. Let me open the homework. Let's see what they written in there. Okay. Homework 4. GS. Get plot. Yeah, I don't think you should create the actual axis, but
just
do
the SVG, like you're appending the group element.
Yes, you want to make everything appended in there, because you should. So draw plot should only be called once, I think, or maybe let me just check. Yeah, I don't think you should set the scale in there.
Yeah, because how could you set the scale until update plot?
Right. So I think you should just append the axis layers, and then maybe you also want to append the axis text, because it's the you might call draw plot when your data change, but if your data don't change in the draw plot changes, you can just do that in update plot, because update plot is when data change. I think you should do that in the data plot, update plot.
So when we first all right, so let's just say I just append like the G element to the SVG. Then when I load up my HTML, before I update any data, I should only see like the world map, right? I should not see the scatter plot at all until because it's not going to draw anything until I actually hit update or interact with it somehow. It's just going to be blank.
You could initiate with some default values. You can just initiate in the script and call to the update plot and then input some default values.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So any other question about the axis? Okay. And then, so another thing that you're gonna use for the scatter plot is to update your circles. So I have another example for this.
Real quick, I have a question on that last one actually. Why would you use a class instead of an ID? Because it seems like there's only going to be one x-axis.
That's a good point, but normally we probably sometimes it's harder to trace exactly how many elements you have in there. If you have many plots, then you're gonna have many axes. So it's really up to you if you want to use class or not class.
Okay.
So you can use ID if you want, but it's really just, it doesn't matter, I think.
Okay, in a bigger project, you might have multiple axes that you don't need to change simultaneously. Gotcha.
Yeah. Or you want to style them same. If you want to style them similarly, that's why you're gonna want to do a class, right? Because class is the way that you can have the same styling in your CSS.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna move back to the circle update. So I posed a question here. So what happens when you do SVG select all circle and bind the data and directly do exit remove? So it actually took me a while to think about this while I was preparing for this. So this is just, this is pretty simple. It's just an SVG and have a circle maker. And then if we uncomment this, it disappears. So anyone knows why it would disappear without looking at my explanation here? I'm gonna hide that. Okay. Okay, so the reason that would disappear is when you do something like remove or append in SVG, it updates your selection. So for example, here, you thought that circle is this circ is select all circle, that selection, and bind it to the data. But when you do directly after this, do exit and remove, it actually updated this this variable to whatever was removed, and then so this selection. So the later selection, because we begin with no circles, and then when we bind the data to that empty selection, it actually doesn't have anything to remove from there. So this is an empty selection. So circle is an empty selection without any data binding. So no matter what you do later, it's not going to append any circles on there because it's not binding to the data. It's another selection. So if you remove this and do this, this will work because you did the circ exit remove on that variable, but you didn't assign this to anything else. So this circ selection didn't change. And then you can do enter append, and then that's the circle enter, you merge them together, and then you style them just using the this variable. So any question about using enter and exit? Okay, so added in version 5, drawing is another way to update. It's much cleaner. So this is all the same, but you can do just select all circle and bind the data and just do drawing circle. This will just handle the data update for you. So if I comment this out, and this is called circle joiner. So this will appear, and then you don't actually have to worry about any enter or exit. But drawing is harder to use when you want to specify the transition because you need to do functions inside drawing. So that's a little bit harder. But if you don't want to do any animations or transitions, this is much easier to use for your homework. Any questions about drawing or enter or exit? Okay, so I actually already touched on the events when we were talking about the map, but just to go through that again, so you can do do .on and then put what is the event in there. So there are like quite a lot of events that you can use. So all of these you can use them in there. And then, so after, so in this, you would do a function. So this is like anonymous function. And then in here, you can do like a bunch of stuff. And then, so for this homework, I think you will probably use onClick and onInput. I'm not sure about onChange. But yeah, if you want to update like highlight or update the year based on the slider. So that's the input, and based on clicking, that's on click. You can also call mouse click. So I have another example for that. So here we just have a slider here. So this is pretty similar to how your homework look like. So you have so you have like a scale for the year, and then this is setting up the slider. So I believe that's already set up for you. And then you have a label. So that's the, not that was label, but text. This is the text. And then slider, you can like set up this text. So this is pretty standard D3. So this is where it gets interesting, is that year slider, this is we initiated here. So you can do dot on input. So I think, okay, another thing I need to mention is that this is not a SVG element. So that's why on input, this type of events can be used because it's a DOM element. But this won't work if you have like SVG element, I think. If you want to use D3 event, that's different from DOM event. But you can do on input. So this is basically just an input, and then it's an input. And then on input, it's basically saying you change this, and then you do a function here. So within this, you can update your text location. So here we use the slider text we initiated here, and then do text. It's the value of this input. So notice that we use this dot value. I'm not sure if you noticed that for your homework, there are somewhere that says something like let that equals this when we do a function. So the reason for that is when you have anonymous functions like this, this inside here is different than this inside the function. So how to put this, like, so in here, that this is different from this in this function. So if you want to refer to the class this, you would use that because you already initiated, and that won't have a name collision with this. Does that explain it better? Like, it's a little bit confusing, I think. So you want to use that if you do, like, I believe active, like if active year is something that you have, so you have like this active year. So this is inside the class. It's a class like value, but here you can't do this dot active year. It's undefined because this, if we print that, it's the input this. So this is different from this active year this. So when you want to refer that, you want to use that active year. So that is not override in here. So it's still using this here. So it's defining here, and you let that equal to this. And when you refer that, it's using this that. Does that? I hope that explain how like why you're using this and that in the anonymous function. It's
yeah.
clear.
One small question. What is I'm not sure what this is inside the function though.
So when you have a D3 event, I think it's the event itself. So this is the input, but it actually doesn't show the value here. Let me see if we can console log the year slider.
Like an object, event object or something, and then it's just passing that?
Yes, it's basically the event. But I'm actually not sure exactly. Like sometimes like this is different. But it's always like when you have anonymous function like this, the this in here is always different compared to if outside here you want to do this dot active year. That works, right? Because it's outside this function. But it's in the class. This will work. This won't work. This won't work. You have to use the other one. That will work. And then in here, this dot value gets you the input here. So you're probably gonna want to use this in your homework. So you can use this value and update the text here. The attribute X, you can also update the location based on the value and use the scale that you already defined previously. So any question about slider or this, that?
So you're saying the this and that essentially needs to be used inside an anonymous function since you're not importing anything into that function. Like it's just in its own
Even if
local
you
scope.
input something into this function, this is this, it's still different compared to the this outside. So
Okay.
if I use, let me see.
But if you're calling this inside the anonymous function, it's essentially only what is being input to the function and nothing outside of it.
It's not the input. I think sometimes it's like the function itself. This is just making sure I'm not showing solutions. Okay. So you can see that. So this is actually just what's given in your homework in the dropdown. So this is using that. So when you want to refer this function, so update plot is the function you defined here, right? So when you want to call this function, normally you would say this.update plot because it's in the class. However, it won't work because that's inside this function. So you want to define that equal this, and then that's the update plot because that is not override inside this anonymous function. So even if this has a input, this is not the input, but I think it's different each time. Sometimes I just print this out and see what this looks like. So you can do a console log and see what this is. The CodePen is not a good example because it doesn't actually have class in there. But if you want to see what it looks like, you can just do console.log this and console.log that. You can compare what's the difference in here. But in general, if you want to use, if in a class, you never want to use this update plot because that won't work, right? It will say update plot is undefined or this doesn't have the update plot, something like that.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's pretty much all I have prepared. So I'm opening up for questions.
If no one else has a question, yeah, I'll ask if no one else is. So I'm just gonna, I was asking about this earlier also in Slack. When should we be constructing the data structure? Like it seems like for each plot there's like an associated data structure. Should we be doing that from the scripts.js or should we be doing that in the when we instantiate the scatter plot?
It should be inside your updates data, right? So for example, your get plot, the data is changed every time when you change the slider or the input indicators, right?
Because we need the X and Y indicator, right? Okay. I was just making
sure. So that should always, for the plot data, that should always be constructed inside your update plot because that's where you get the X indicator, Y indicator, right? And also it's changed based on active year. So essentially we provided these class to help you to bind your data to an array of these objects so that you have all the data you needed when you're styling your SVG elements. So we don't want you to go to another data set and then looking for information. We want you to just have that already there, and then it's pretty easy from there, right? You can just do D arrow and D dot country or D dot xwal. That's the reason we have this class for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I had a question. First one, It's hopefully a little easier. Or basically, if so population doesn't seem to exist for everyone. There's less population records than child mortality, GDP, fertility rates, everything. So if those don't exist and X is one of your, or sorry, population is one of your 3 options for X, Y, or circle size, should we just get rid of that and exclude those?
I don't think you need to exclude those. You can just have them in there as
0.
Because when they're missing, because you're basically reconstructing the array to the array of plot data input every time when the data changes. So even if there are missing rows of data, it shouldn't even impact your plot at all, because you're reconstructing the plot data every time.
Right. Okay. I guess, I mean, so, I mean, this one is in there, but let's say that Nigeria doesn't have a population, right? Like Nigeria doesn't exist in the population at all. Should that record not exist then?
If that record doesn't exist, then it shouldn't be a problem when you're looping through your data input, right? Because it's just not there, then you're not gonna have that in your array. So
that's what I'm asking, right? Should we get rid of it, or should we just have it as 0, or what should we do with it?
Because your country here, so this is constructed like for each country, it should be like a object of this. And
correct. So
you're
look at
looping through the
country
data
name
input
for the X data objects. So let's say that Nigeria doesn't exist in population, but Nigeria is a Y, or the Y active year. So that value is now null.
Okay.
So if that value is null, should that country not exist at all, or should the default become 0, or what do you want us to do with that? Does that make sense?
I think it's up to you.
Okay, great.
I don't think we will grade you, like we will deduct points on if you if you get rid of missing data or you just put 0 on missing data. It's really, I think it's up to you to how to handle that, as long as your program works. So like, because I don't think our homework actually tell you that we're gonna deduct points if you don't draw missing data.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, it's really just about, you have that scatter plot drawn, the bubbles are colored, like the X and Y and circle size are where they're supposed to be. So like, treating missing data is it's always gonna be a thing when you're doing data visualization. So like a lot of the time, it's up to the people who are doing the visualization to decide what to do with them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's up to you. Like you can do either like if you want to just get rid of them, or yeah. But you want to be careful when you're calculating the min and max, because it might be like missing value will make the min to be 0 when they are just missing values. So that's something you want to be careful with.
Right. Okay. And then I noticed in the announcements that there was an error in the original homework that said to call draw plot in the year slider, and that it should actually be calling update plot. Should that same thing apply to the drop down menu, or should the drop down menus actually draw plot?
I think you might want to actually call draw plot, because, or let's see.
Yeah, the way I imagined it.
Fine.
Okay.
But you might want to I think, let's see, the new data set is. Let me just look at how draw plot. in here. Oh, get plot. Okay, I don't think you want to call this again because it will append another div.
Exactly.
Right. So
It should probably be update plot as well.
yeah. So it's always like you probably don't want to call this again after the initialization. Because this is just appending everything, right? If you call it again, it will just append everything again.
Okay. So yeah, that's kind of what I figured. I just want to make sure that since only one of them got updated, that we're kind of on the same page.
Yeah, it should like I think we're not gonna grade your homework line by line, right? That's gonna take like a really long time. It's it like starting from this homework to like afterwards, you have more freedom, I think, in terms of like how to make things work. Like a lot of time you don't have to ask us if you want to change like how our provided data provided code is. I think you have more freedom in terms of like if you want to change like the margin or if you want to change the width, that's fine.
So are you guys really just grading that like the actual the dashboard works, so you're not nitpicking how we got it to work?
Well, we're gonna look at the code, making sure you're not just hard coding them, right? Or just making a GIF there. We're gonna actually look at your code and see you're updating things dynamically, but we're not gonna code like grade line by line and say, oh, you have that here. That's just too much.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope that makes sense. It's really just if it says to call this here and you say, you know what, I don't think that should be called there. I don't think that's gonna be a problem.
Right. Yeah, it's just kind of confusing sometimes because you're like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm being directed in one way to call a certain function here.
Yes,
but it seems like I don't understand how that function would work. So I mean, that's why I said, that's why I asked. It seemed like the update plot would be a better
yeah. I'm gonna update the README after this. I think you're right. Update plot would actually make more sense. Another thing I want to touch on is that where's the update country. This is a callback function. So this is how you talk. Make sure that's. So this is how you talk with like different components and have the same country active, the selected country. So if you look at the script, we define the update country function here. So this is a function that you're gonna fill in like, so you're gonna update when this is called, it should update all your views based on the update, like the input country ID. And this becomes the input to in here. And then when you're something updated, you should call this function inside that function. In like, for example, inside here, it says like you have this update country already, and then you probably want to call this and say, oh, update the new highlight country, and then that function will actually just call this function and then update all your views. I remember when I was doing this homework, I had struggled on this, so I just want to touch on that.
Okay, could you say that again? Just kind of like succinctly.
Yeah. So update country is a function that you're gonna actually input into DotMap and getplot. So you have this two as an input here, right? So so that input, you're gonna actually call this function when you're updating the selection. So I think in the homework we asked you, if you click on dot on the map, it should also highlight, right? So that's basically based on this update country here. So this is how you talk throughout, like how your get plot is gonna talk to the world map. It's through this update country. And then this update country is a function that was defined in the script. So you're gonna fill in here how you're gonna update different views. But essentially, with JavaScript, it's the pointer that's being passed around. So it's still this update country as a function. You're not making a new object or anything when you pass it in. So you're gonna call this, and then that will refer back to this.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So does that make sense? Yeah. So like JavaScript is like pointer-ish. So like why you're
it's
saying
passing a function.
Yeah. So like also like if you just say constant info box equal to something, and then you have something else that's info box b equals info box, it's not gonna make a new info box. It's actually just having another pointer pointed to info box, and then that's pointed to here. So with JavaScript, it's like when you're making like something equal to something, it's not making a new thing, but it just pointed back to that. So that's just how JavaScript works. Okay, I'm gonna stop share, and then